Welcome back to Vinyl Decal School. Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoy watching these videos as much as I enjoy making them. Any likes and subscribes are always appreciated. So I thought it was about time that I did a video troubleshooting problems you might have when you're either taking the transfer tape off your vinyl decal or when you're applying to different surfaces. So I'm just going to go over like a few different tips and tricks that you can use when applying vinyl decals to make sure they stick properly, stick completely smooth and last as long as possible. So the first tip is to make sure you're using good quality vinyl and transfer tape. This could affect how long something lasts and how easy it is to weed and cut. If you test a piece first, just like a little corner, to make sure you have the correct cut settings, that always helps. It means you don't waste loads. There's an option to do it on the silhouette, but on the Cricut, you can just make your own little circle or triangle or something to try out cutting before you go ahead cutting the whole thing. Then in terms of transfer tape, I use this kind for almost everything I do. I never really have any problems. However, if you are applying onto something that is quite delicate, that might rip, or like something like a balloon, for example, you might want to use like masking tape or transfer paper instead, something that's not quite as sticky. You also need to make sure you're using a suitable surface. Most flat, smooth surfaces are fine. But if you're using fabric, then usually you'll want to use iron-on vinyl instead of adhesive vinyl. So once you've made sure you've got all the correct vinyl, transfer tape, you're using the right surface, you need to prepare your surface. So if you're using wood, make sure it is as smooth and as sanded down as possible. You can use like rougher wood, but it means you're going to get more kind of lumps and bumps in your vinyl. So the smoother you get it, the better. And you can stain or paint your wood like this one, it's been stained. You just need to make sure it is completely dry and ideally cured before applying any vinyl, because when you take it off, there's a chance it might kind of pull the paint and vinyl off with the transfer tape. Then whether it is stained, painted or left bare, you might also want to look into a water-based sealer to help your vinyl stick, especially if you're wanting it to stay there kind of long term. For short term stuff, it's probably not necessary, but for long term stuff, and if you're having real problems getting it to stick to your wood, then it might be something you want to look into. Then for most other surfaces, they shouldn't really need anything doing to them. But if you're applying to something that might have had dirt or grease on it, or like a build-up of something like a car or like a window, you might want to use rubbing alcohol to clean the surface first, obviously just being aware that you're not using anything that could damage the surface. I've never actually used rubbing alcohol before. I've never really needed to because I've never had anything that's had like stubborn stains that I couldn't get off with just kind of like a glass cleaner or a multi-purpose cleaner. So for stuff like this, like acrylic and mirrors, I'll usually just give it a thorough clean first. Let it completely dry, make sure there's no dust or like residue left, and then I will apply my decal. So once your surface is prepared, it's time to get your decal ready. For the basics on how to create, make and weed a decal, I already have a video on that, you can check it out here. But if you're having issues getting the decal away from the backing paper, turn it over, rub the back and take the paper away from the transfer tape. If it's not coming away, put a small amount of pressure on the place where it won't come off, like this. Then once you've got your decal away from the backing paper, it's time to apply to your item. Pop it in the place where you want it to go. Then make sure all of the vinyl is stuck down onto the surface before you try and take the transfer tape off. This is quite easy with flat stuff, but with like curved surfaces, you sometimes have to kind of pop it in the middle first and then smooth outwards so that it all sticks down and kind of curves around the edge. For more tips on applying to a curved surface, I do actually have a previous video, so you can take a look at that. If you have stuck it all down though, it looks as if your decal has stuck to your surface and you're thinking, right, it's time to take the transfer tape off, and you're slowly peeling it back but the decal is not sticking to the item and it's kind of being lifted up, then it might just be a case of needing to go super slow and then just pressing bits down as you lift them up. There is also a way to do it where you hold if you've got a credit card or vinyl scraper behind the transfer tape, and as you peel it up you kind of put pressure on, and then that will help hold the letters down as well, but you've got to be really careful with this method and not go too quickly because you might end up ripping the letters. If you've tried all of those things though and it's still giving you trouble and you can't make it stick to your item, there is also the option of using a bit of heat. You've obviously got to be really careful again, depending on the item you're using. Like if you're using anything precious or expensive or that is quite delicate, then this might not be a good option for you. But if you're confident it can take a bit of heat, then it should be fine. So if you get a hairdryer and blow it over your decal, this makes the glue tacky and it should help your decal stick to the item. One tip I do have, if you've got like a really big decal, it might be easier to cut it into a few sections and apply it that way. Sometimes when I'm dealing with like big decals and applying them, it's quite hard to get them straight and flat and stuck down without kind of having any issues in the meantime. Much easier to try and line them up in smaller sections and just work with it bit by bit. So if you've stuck your vinyl down, you've taken the transfer tape off, but you still have a few wrinkles, then there is an option of lifting up your vinyl really carefully. You want something kind of flat or small as possible to lift it up. You don't want to damage it. And then smooth it back down. Again, do this really slowly. Don't press it fully until you know you've got it smooth, and just be really careful. If it's like a bigger block of vinyl though, or something in between something else, and you're not going to be able to pull it up without damaging it, but you've ended up with some air bubbles right in the middle and you can't push them out or can't get rid of them, then there is an option to pop the bubbles, and you really want to pop it without moving it so that you're not creating like a big hole. I would only do this as a last resort though, if I can't find any other way to push the air out. Or you could make like a tiny slit with a craft knife and then push the two sections of vinyl together. But again, I would only do this as a last resort and then enjoy. How long it will last will depend completely on the item, the type of vinyl, and kind of where it is kept or stored. But if you've followed all the correct instructions, it's completely flat when it's stuck down, and you're using permanent vinyl, then it should last quite a long time. I hope you found that useful. Let me know in the comments if you've got any questions, or if you have any other good tips and tricks that you use when you're applying decals. Please don't forget to subscribe, and thanks for watching.